Well, hello, folks. Welcome back to another episode of the Smoke Pit. I'm Stu, the Graybeard veteran. I'm joined today with two special guests. One is a prior Marine, retired, and that we served with the Second Force Recon together. And then Al, who's a prior Navy, also obviously still in the firefighting, paramedic, and all that other stuff. So he's the guru of medicine. That's what I call him, Doc Chase. So Ed, give us kind of a breakdown of who you are, where you come from, what makes you Ed Ford.
Retired Recon Marine, you know that. We worked together in Second Force back in the 90s. Retired in 04, rolled right into contracting right away. Funny story, a mutual friend of ours, Chris Boyd.
Yeah.
He was working for Crucible at the time. He went ahead and sent out a mass email saying, hey, if you're getting out, you want to do this kind of work, make this kind of money, work with these kind of guys, send me your resume. And that opened the door for me for contracting. Start off with Kabul, Afghanistan at WPPS, Worldwide Personal Protective Services. Pretty much we're escorting the embassy personnel around the country. Worked for Crucible. Then after Crucible, I ended up working for SOC. And with SOC, I've got onto the mobile teams. And I was able to take all that experience from prior contracting and to SOC. And once again, just when you think you know it all, boom, the learning curve goes way up.
As we all know that.
Yeah.
And also, too, you're a fitness guru, too, right now, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm a fitness instructor.
That's what I need to get, some fitness instruction.
That's 90% of the fight, meal plan, what you eat and how you eat.
Yeah. Unfortunately for me, we'll get I've had so many surgeries over the past 10 years. And right now I'm going tomorrow. Yeah, I have to have my right knee rebuilt again. So it's been I'm only 60 years old, but I 26 years in our community. Kind of takes a little toll.
But I liked your 60 seconds to 10 seconds.
Yes, I used to. Well, Ed, I was back then. I was in phenomenal shape. Loved to fight. Had a great time being in the Marine Corps. I was just. Didn't think I'd stay in as long as I did because I didn't think I'd see a staff sergeant or sergeant, for Christ's sake. So the Corps was so long. But anyway, I digress. So anything else you got to say, Ed, before we turn it over to Mr. Al?
Yeah, I work a little bit as a fitness trainer. I'm also a driver for FedEx, so still protected. So I'm still moving the mail.
Yeah, still out of mail.
Big for me is I keep busy and I found something that I like to do and I just do it.
Good. Did he freeze up on me? No, there you are.
No?
Okay. I thought you froze up. So then we have Al, they call Doc Chase. So Al, kind of give us your background and.
Well, a former Navy corpsman, got out way long time ago in 81, and I've been a paramedic on the civilian side for a little bit over 40 years. Firefighter paramedic with Community Fire Rescue at Houston. I met Ed in Iraq in 2005. He was one of the trainers for Crucible. And then didn't Crucible come on board for DynCorp as an independent training group?
Yeah, they were the trainers for DynCorp, and then later on DynCorp absorbed all of the Crucible trainers. But most of them didn't last that long under Dyn.
Yeah, he pretty much taught me everything I know. And he was up in Afghanistan. I was still in Iraq. We're both working for SOC, but I was covering down for medics at different FOB sites when they would go on their leave rotation. So I'd spend 1 month at one FOB, and then they'd fly me over to another one, and I'd work there until one of Ed's teams got hit in Afghanistan. Didn't have a medic on board, and so they dropped my name in the hat, and I got the job. So I transitioned over to Afghanistan, and we've been hooked up ever since.
No, that's great. So the reason we're here today, folks, is that Al and Ed just published their first book as co-authors. It's called Postcards Through Hell. I read the book cover to cover, which is rare for me to do that. And this is one phenomenal read. The good thing about it is that if you're a prior military, prior law enforcement, or contractor, you get this. If you're a civilian that's never been in combat, you'll understand it when you read this book. Because there's some heart-wrenching stuff in here that make you cry. Then you have that demon boy, which we'll talk a little bit about in the rest of this podcast, that shows that things are not as green as everybody thinks they are in the contracting world. I think I can say with total honesty is that, give me $150,000, $200,000 a year to go down range and get shot at but if I get killed, I don't really get too much, if you're in the military. And some of the stories in this book, if they were military guys, every single one that's in this book would have a Bronze Star or a Silver Star, and in some cases, I think a Navy Cross, based off of the stories that I read through this book. And you guys articulated and kind of broke it down to how people can understand it in layman's terms. I call it in kindergarten terms, what it actually means to be a contractor in a wartime zone, which means it's a business. It's not like the military, which is still a business, but it gives you that thing. So, I mean, the biggest thing I want to talk about is the ring road. As we all know, the ring road was the road. If you wanted a gunfight, hit ring road. Yeah, I mean, that's just the way. I haven't been to Afghanistan. I'm just going off of prior stories. So kind of give me in your both views of when you got on ring road, knowing you had to travel that, getting to Marker 24, I believe it was, and you know you're coming up to get in a gunfight. How do you prepare for all this?
A lot of it's preparedness, you know. We start from the night before. You're doing your mission brief, giving the op order, and then you're running out. You're going outside. You're going through the vehicles. Make sure everything's set up. Everything's tied down. You know, you're running through your rehearsals, and it doesn't have to be, hey, contact left, contact right. But you know, you're running through these rehearsals as a team to building that team mindset. You know, how to set up a tow, how to fix a flat tire, how to set up to take down a fuel a gas station so we can get fuel from the civilians. You know, all the little things that, you know, everybody thinks that rehearsals are all about, you know, mag dumping and popping smoke.
Yeah, no.
Those little things there, like, you know, how to change that tire. Where is the power drills? Where's the, you know, all the little things that way, instead of spending 10 minutes changing a tire, you're only spending 3 minutes. That way you can get moving again.
Yeah, it's like that pit crew.
Yeah, exactly. And I was going to say that out because, like, for you, you had to go ahead and make sure the kit. Now, your medical kits, I'm sure you had a blowout kit in every one of your vehicles where you had 3 in the convoy or 4 in the convoy. But in those blowout kits, what actually did you have as a standard SOP for these guys every time you travel? Because there had to be something that I'm talking about when you were traveling with these guys, had in each vehicle that you knew was there if shit went bad.
We actually carried 3 different types of med kits. Everybody had their own IFAC. It had the basic items, but then they would personalize them according to what they felt they needed. And then we carried these go bags that were just a lot easier to throw to one person or throw to another. Or if you had to get out of the truck real quick, you could take it with you and had a little bit more comprehensive stuff. And then, of course, my bag was set for a 10-man team. Had surgical assets, you know, just a bunch of things that would, you know, help us in a situation where we were injured and it would take more than 72 hours to get to a cache. So,
right. What is a cache? What's that mean in layman's terms? For
a combat surgical hospital.
Yeah. So cache or MASH, as they would call it. But yeah, I think the thing to me was that just thinking of how you had to get, I mean, they were talking prior, how you had to get supplies. You know, how do you do it? Because you're there on a government contract, but not under the SOFA agreement contract for being in a theater, which is two people that you understand. You have a SOFA agreement, then you have a DOD agreement with that country to do the contract and stuff that like you guys were doing. So
yeah, the interesting thing to me was the you know, the company, they gives you a packing list. You know, when you get your letter of authorization and you're getting ready to go into country, they'll send you a list of items that you probably bring with you. And of course, one of them will be like an IFAC kit. And then once you get into country, the company might have some remedial supplies that are just kind of laying around, but certainly nothing or enough to support you know, a mission nor an entire villa. You know, we not just responsible for guys out that are running on the roads, but we have static guards that we have to take care of. We got our administrative staff, and you're basically the doc for all of those people.
Right.
And so if you weren't out there spending your own money, or people weren't helping you out by sending you supplies, because I knew a lot of guys in theater, both Iraq and Afghanistan, that would send me medical equipment, but we had to beg, borrow, and steal. And that's basically what it was, you know? Well,
yeah, that's what I was telling that early, because I know when I was in Iraq in 06, I had a couple guys out there that were contractors that needed some stuff, you know, whether medical kits or, you know, chem lights or new tires. There was someone running the Humvees. And it was just, it's so you know. If you know somebody in theater, especially if you served with them, shit, whatever you need, we got it for you, especially from the military to contract guys. But I mean, the difference I guess it is from the Ring of Highway is the same thing as the Highway of Death in Kuwait. So when we did Desert Shield, Desert Storm, we had that long highway of death. We actually were the RNS that watched the B-52s come over and bomb the shit out of that.
Yeah.
And then the next day. So again, it's like
little after, the after was pretty cool.
Yeah, we got a few things that were different, I guess, because we had to drive. We have the Brits kind of pack up some of the bodies until they called us out of there because it was a death trap because all the disease and stuff was going on. Because they've been laying there for 2 days. They were just, it was just amazing. But just saying it because a lot of guys don't get it. When you're in theater, you talk about the fear and the adrenaline. When you're in a gunfight, you have no fear. You have a shitload of adrenaline. It's when the gunfight's done, you sit down and kind of do reconsolidation, figure out what's going on. It's when you realize, damn, that was close. You got bullet holes by your ear, or, you got an IED went off in the corner, and you're like, shit, thank God that truck was there, But I mean, for you guys, you both were in Iraq and Afghanistan. Kind of go over the difference between, I'll start with you, Al, first. The difference between the dynamics in Iraq when you were there, 2004, right?
2005.
2005, and then
2008. Then I went. I jumped back and forth between the two countries. So
good money. So that's all that matters. Yeah, good money is all that matters. So what the difference was between Iraq at that time and then when you got to Afghanistan in 2008, when the fight was pretty heavy.
Well, the eye opener for me was EFPs. I didn't really know a lot about explosively formed projectiles or shape charges, and we had that was a primary weapon of choice with the enemy, and that's the reason I met Ed, is because I was writing an article titled Thames in the Red Zone for one of these SWAT magazines here. And I didn't know anything about it. And he basically educated me, just as a shape charge. And it can defeat armor up to, 7 inches thick. It comes out at like 20,000 feet per second. And it's a devastating, a catastrophic takedown. So we had to respond to those types of injuries. And so that was the learning curve. The other thing that was different was everything that we did in Iraq was PSD, personal security detail, and we're transporting people instead of cargo. There's a huge difference. The risk might be the same, but you're moving a lot faster. You're working with a different set of guys because they're, all different. We had third country nationals in Afghanistan, but these guys were primarily South African and Australia and New Zealand. So, but they were like-minded individuals. That was the pretty cool thing because then you get that team dynamic, and then it kind of helps you transition to Afghanistan. But we never saw the enemy in Iraq. I never saw a bad guy. I mean, I might have said one guy was a bad guy, but I never really traded bullets with them like we did in Afghanistan. When we got over to Afghanistan, the Taliban, there's some hard ass motherfuckers. They like to fight.
Well, yeah, that's what we tell it. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Al.
Yeah, and then of course the learning curve was getting in the convoy. I had no experience with convoy operations, and so it was basically on the job training. But SOC doesn't hire guys and train them up. They hire skill set, and I had I think enough of a skill set to be recommended for the job because I needed to fill that specific billet. Everything else was on the job training.
And what about for you, Ed? What's it? Because you were both down in Iraq and Afghanistan as well.
Yeah.
Were you in Iraq as a Marine now?
For the invasion, okay. But then afterwards, I retired right after that. And then when I went back to Iraq, I was there as a contractor. Biggest difference with the IEDs between Iraq and Afghanistan, Iraq had some pretty elaborate stuff. I mean, you had the passive infrared trip lines and stuff like that so they could and all set off of a time delay. Right. Versus Afghanistan, the Afghans weren't as elaborate. Like what they did, what they lacked in finesse, they made up for in size and their ability to hide those IEDs. So you might not you probably wouldn't catch an EFP in Afghanistan, but you probably have about 80 pounds of HMX go off underneath your vehicle. After you had a route clearance team roll over and saying, "Oh yeah, it's all good."
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah. Now you guys are good.
And the other thing was, the Taliban. They weren't afraid to fight us. I mean, they would stand and fight you. Iraq, they'd pop an IED, they'd pop a few rounds and they'd disappear. Afghanistan, they would stand and fight you. And I remember my buddy Chris Vale, he first came on my team as an ATL. I was briefing him up, and I was like, look, man, these guys, they will fight us. They will stand and fight. He looked at me, smiled, and said, a worthy adversary. Yeah, I was like, dude, be careful what you wish for, man.
I tell every young kid I hear today, even being retired, like, yeah, I'm gonna join the military. I'm gonna go downrange and shoot bad guys. And my question to him is, you play Halo or what's the other shit these kids play? Oh yeah, Call of Duty. I'm gonna explain to you one thing. Those bullets that are being shot on Call of Duty, they're real in real life, and they hurt. So just so you wish for it, and it's probably bad, but you wish for combat.
That's why I tell them to note there's no reset button in a real gun.
I think in life as well, we talk about it all the time, is that you always, the what if factor. And I try never to have, what if I'd have done this? Or that's why I got married so late, 26. I wanted to make sure I was with the right chick the rest of my life. I don't want to play this game a day and then go, I just don't want to play it. So it's like everything in life. You got to make sure that you want to push forward and, and do the right thing. But, in your cases, you guys were in the military. You fortunately had an opportunity to go downrange, but now your contractor's getting shot at for big money and loving it. And going, there's something wrong with these dudes. There's a screw loose upstairs, or to say that. Because even in the book, you guys get pissed off during a couple firefights, like, hey, shitheads, all we're trying to do is get to the hotel to get something to eat, for Christ's sake. Leave us alone. And we'll get to some of that parts here as well. But I mean, at the end of the day, I was trying to get at the way Afghanistan ROEs are for the military, and Iraq and Afghanistan were two different ROEs, and allowed us to, we had to follow Geneva Convention, certain guidelines. But for contractors, you're kind of left out there on your own. Unless you know somebody at a fob you're going to, you can set up entry to them, or you got a clear route. Dude, you're on your own. Your air support says in the book. Your medevacs says in the book. It sucks. Yeah. Especially for you, Doc Chase, Al, is that as much as you busted your ass to talk to your medevac, your dust-off guys, and go to the hospital to get all this stuff, you still probably had to pull teeth once in a while because you're like, who are you? You're what? A contractor? You don't follow my preview. But you that knowing you for reading a book, if I didn't know you and I read the book, dude, you're a badass. And you're also a grumpy old man, too, to everybody in this book. So
yeah.
I mean, the first thing out, Doc Chase, he's a grumpy old man. But I mean, it just shows that the camaraderie, you talk about the brotherhood and all that stuff. What is brotherhood? Me take care of the guy to my left and to my right. That's brotherhood. Because I'm not worried about myself right now. As long as these two are safe, that means I'm safe. Yeah. We're good. That's the brotherhood. Willing to risk your life for the guy to your left and God to your right. That's just what it is.
Hey, we're old for a reason too.
Yes. I don't think I'm old. I just have an aging factor, because I can't stay 25. My brain is 25. I was telling Ed earlier. From the neck down, it's 95. This shit is broken. But I try my best to kind of stay somewhat in shape, and round is a shape. So I kind of still like indulging. I love cooking. But anyway, I digress. Let's get back to the reality here of this great book. Now, my question too would be, the training you received for Iraq, was it different than the training the training going to Afghanistan? Because you mentioned earlier, Doc, that you had to have a specific skill set for Afghanistan to go to SOC. But in Iraq, you really didn't. You're a doc, you're a paramedic, blah, blah, blah. It allowed you to go on and do things. But
when you get hired, they run you through their indoctrination course that, it includes a lot of other stuff. I remember I took a battlefield reconnaissance and IED recognition as well, and that was an eye opener, man. I mean, they had you drive through at your normal speed. It was about a quarter-mile lane, and you say there's 4 guys on your team, and you have to pick out all these IEDs and booby traps and stuff like that at 60 miles an hour. And so we go through the quarter mile, and one guy's got 3 or 4, and I've got a couple, and another guy's got a couple, and they say, okay, now we want you to drive through it at 10 miles an hour. And at 10 miles an hour, we're saying, holy shit, man, there's like 30 or 40 planted IEDs all over the place. And then they take you out of it, and then you got to walk through it. And there was something like 240 devices that were buried. And I mean, there were animals and Coke cans and trash and pallets of wood. And and some of them were up in the we weren't looking up, we were looking down. You know, we're fires, we're looking for dead animals and all kinds of stuff. And so the first mission that we ran after that, everybody had pucker factor, but we'd see a stereo wire hanging out, and it would offset to the left or offset to the right.
Yeah. I think too with the thing with the IEDs, did you guys have no kidding EOD guys with you in Afghanistan, or was it something you guys were trained?
No. I worked with EOD guys on different types of contracts that were interesting because you could, identify ordinances and things of that nature. When Ed was talking about how they were able to bury these devices, sometimes they'd use pressure plates, sometimes they'd be command detonated, sometimes they'd be, physically detonated, but they ran them in coverts, and these coverts ran almost every 1,000 yards. You'd see a covert on Ring Road,
Right.
because they have farming plots everywhere, and that's how they crisscross their irrigation. So these guys aren't out here digging holes; they're just crawling through a pipe and putting a device in there, and then it's a piece of cake. And they can do it at night with minimal detection or whatnot. And there's several times that I guarantee you, Ed can attest to this. We probably drove over IEDs that didn't detonate.
Yeah.
And that's the real life eye opener for you. I mean, that's the testament. That it's like every fourth covert has IED and it just didn't go off. And was by chance it didn't go off? Was there somebody not there? Was it a dud? I mean, what the hell? Planting IEDs. And back to the rules for the use of escalation force, you couldn't shoot those guys. Much as I wanted to, you can't do it. But
Really?
Broad daylight. So
Yeah, we were Iraq. If we saw someone implant an IED device, that was in 2006-07. We had the legal right. It basically was if you drove an Opel or you wore a tracksuit, you're a free game.
Wow.
You don't give boys of the recon guys, say, here are your two targets of opportunity. It's like a free for all. You think you're at a duck range and watch this shit go like, guys. They're down the road 2 miles, shooting around down there to get a combat expert isn't working. So
it's my Purple Heart.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. I was talking about awards. You read these stories in here of some of the cats you serve with. There's a couple of them I'd love to meet. You guys would be in it, like you said, definitely the Silver Star Navy Cross arena. And in some cases, you probably could push, for Medal of Honor for a couple of things. I mean, it has the ability.
Round comes to mind there.
That's
if there's not an award for valor, there should be an award for one tough son of a bitch, man. Because that guy,
Scott.
Yeah, not only did he get hurt really bad, but he protected his team, while he was injured, and then after he goes home and recovers, he turns around and comes back. I mean, that's
head injury, right? The head injury stay behind.
Back in a couple fractured jaw.
He had a broken back. He was in the lead vehicle on my team. We were going Organese Skin.
Okay, yeah, I got that now.
Yeah, and then lead vehicle. He was in the lead vehicle. Turned the corner around like an embankment. Couple of cargo trucks, and then I saw a gray pool of smoke, and I heard the crack, and I was like, "Oh shit!" So I'm on the radio. Hey, lead, this is Hammer. Lead, this is Hammer. And he wasn't answering, so I deploy, and my medic then was John Pickett, Buddha. He comes running right up behind me, and I see the lead vehicle, beautiful. It was perfectly timed. The doors were blown open, and we go running up, and I see a brown thing laying out on the ground. I thought it was the sleeping bag, and I was like, oh, God, please let this be a sleeping bag. So I grab it and pull it over. It was my interpreter. He was killed instantly for WAD. His legs were amputated at the knees, but there was no blood. So that just tells,
Overpressure.
Yeah, he was dead before he even came out of the vehicle.
Yeah.
And so then I was looking at him, and I looked back at Buddha, and I must have given him that weird look like, gee, Doc, can you fix him?
Yeah.
He's like, fuck him, he's gone, let's go. And I was like, oh, yeah, no shit, let's go. We run towards the vehicle. Buddha jumps in the back of the vehicle with the two gunners, and I'm going around the front, and that's when Scott Brown plots out with an AK-47. And he runs 100 yards up this hill with a broken back and 2 fractures in his pelvis. Runs up a hill, He posts himself on security. I was like, dude, I run up there after. I'm like, stay here. Do not move. I cannot afford to lose you.
Right.
And he's like, dude, I'm all fucked up. I'm on adrenaline right now. I was like, all right, but just stay here.
Right.
So we go back down. We pull Pero, the driver, out of the vehicle. It was apparent though that he wasn't going to make it. He was just coughing up huge amounts of blood. You know, it's just like, God damn, dude, I'm sorry, bro. I'll just have to see you on the other side.
Yeah.
But Doc worked him for like 20 minutes. Buddha worked on him for like 20 minutes. Was still doing his. I mean, he tried to save him.
Yeah.
We finally got the convoy moving again. Buddha carries him down, Scott down the hill. I carry Scott to the vehicle, and as I'm getting ready to set him down in the bumper, Buddha goes, "Hey, be careful! Don't drop him." And then all his weight just shifts the wrong way, and I end up fucking dropping him. And he's like, "Ah!" I'm like, "God damn, dude, I'm so sorry."
Yeah. And then knowing you, Ed, you probably smacked him, hey, something that was, you know,
Oh man, I'm like,
fucking ultras.
"Sorry, bro."
Yeah. Think about yes. Go ahead.
I mean, he ended
Oh, I'm sorry.
And I mean, yeah, he ended up standing for like another 3 hours as we drove out of there. He ended up standing for like another 3 hours up on the PKM while we drove out of there. And yeah, you could hear him scream every time the truck rolled. You could hear him scream because that was all bone on bone grinding. I was like, ah. But we finally got him to the Fob Organy and got him into the cache, and they got him out. They got him stabilized.
Right.
Yeah, but like 6 months later, he's back on the job. He's like, you know what he told me was, I'm going to leave this country on my terms, not on the terms of some little kid with lucky with some tripwires.
You know, it's amazing you say that because obviously there's some vets in all our careers, but we had a kid in Iraq. No, this is Desert Storm. His name was Cook, Michael Cook.
Yeah,
That was one of Mike Cook was in the company with me, and we were getting ready to leave the berm. We're getting all the teams ready to leave the berm, and we were at OP5, and there's a kind of like a mass unit there that had a heliport. And it was a bunch of rocks. So as he's walking across it, he looked at Bill Bates and Kevin Corpin and Dave Light and said, "You guys are going to carry me across these rocks." We're like, "Yeah, whatever, dude, whatever." So they go out and do their 14-day patrol. They come back and we're collecting ammo. Well, he had his grenade attached to his deuce gear. And he pulled out a Humvee. Obviously, the pin got pulled, and he was killed.
Yeah.
But he knew that those three cats were going to carry him across that rock platform. And the eerie part was when they were carrying him across it, they all stopped. They're like, that son of a bitch knew we were going to carry him across this gravel landing pad. It's just weird how people have that instinct, you know. I've gone out on my terms. So I don't know how it was a second sense or fifth sense or sixth sense, whatever you want to call it. But it's just weird how people say, "Hey, I'm going on my own terms," and this guy gets hurt, so screw it. I'm going to go back to Steve's heel, come back down here and whoop some ass.
He was going to leave Afghanistan on his terms.
Yeah,
not on the terms of a lucky trigger man.
Now my question is, was he a prior military guy?
Yeah, he was a former Army. He was an Army scout. Yeah, and then he was a cop down in Texas. And then retired from law enforcement, and then he got into contracting. And yeah, he did a lot of work with the ANP. He did a lot of work with the ANP. As a matter of fact, he was a witness and with the Marines that were embedded with the ANP down in the Helmand province.
Okay.
Because he was telling me the story about a Marine lieutenant. These Afghans were smoking hash right before a patrol. So this lieutenant went up there, pistol whipped two of them. They were going to court-martial the lieutenant.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and they ended up flying. This was right when Scott's healing up from the IED blast. So they finally court-martialing the lieutenant. He's hobbling in on crutches. And he meets the lieutenant. How's it going? And they catch up, and he tells everybody what's going on. And the judge at the court martial's like, I can't believe we're wasting our time with this. Yeah, those EMP were jeopardizing Marines' lives by their actions.
Hell, they were killing them, for Christ's sake. And everybody doesn't know what AMP is, Afghan National Police, right? Yeah.
Yeah,
So, I mean, yeah. So if everybody's read the news or heard anything, in Afghanistan specifically, I think we had a total of like 8 Marines or 12 Marines that were killed while teaching the AMP or patrolling with them.
Yep.
I mean, I know a story of a team that went out with 12 of them, and by the time they got to the target, there was only 6 Marines left. The other 12 AMPs were gone. They just, obviously there was a hellacious firefight, but it's just kind of, why? Why are we wasting our time on stuff? He was trying to protect his boys, the lieutenant, that is. I'm surprised he just didn't beat their ass and put them in a fucking hospital and call it a day. You're done. Yeah, you're done. I'm not playing this game. But I mean, again, see, that's what you have to go through, being whether you're a contractor or whether you're in the military, overseas, or in a combat environment. There's a lot of things you have to watch what you do, because some of the upper brass are there for 2 things: get the combat axe ribbon and to get combat award. That is it.
Yep.
They're not there like you guys out there, treading the ground and doing your job part. People don't know how meaningless it seems in their eyes that you guys are driving mail. What? Do you know what else is going on in this convoy? You guys, that's what kind of pisses me off about the whole thing. This book will help people understand that, Afghanistan specifically is that it was a different animal. And there are certain things that you guys did that people do not know, or the public don't know. You know why? Because the government doesn't want to know that. You guys were down there doing the duty for the United States. You're like our all-board varsity team. We had issues. You're all farm team. That's what you call a farm team. Because most of your prior military or prior law enforcement, did you have anybody on your team, whether in Iraq or Afghanistan, that was not a prior police officer or firefighter or civil servant or military? Everybody.
In Iraq, we had a couple of volunteer firefighters that were medics. They're not really law enforcement officers, but they might have had a TCCC course or worked on a SWAT team as a mutual aid asset or something of that nature. But these guys, they would come over and it would be like, oh, okay, this is what the real world is like. And next thing you know, they're gone. When you get hired by DynCorp, they show you a video of a guy getting his head cut off. Half the class leaves at that point. And then anybody
used to show that.
Yeah. Then they say, okay, you're good enough to go overseas. And then you go overseas, and then you have your in-country training before they put you out on the street.
Right.
It's a prequel too, because you have to do physical fitness, shooting qualifications, and take their course on foreign weapons and things of that nature. And then once that, then you go right out to PSD and you're behind the wheel. So I mean, if you're just that's why Ed said he likes paramedics better than combat medics, because combat medics they kind of lose that skill set over time. They don't do it active unless they're still in the military, which we never had anybody that worked on contract that was active duty or even reserve that I'm aware of. But paramedics, they have to maintain that skill set. They have to take their CEs. They have to train all the time. And I think that's a benefit. I mean, everything that I learned as a corpsman, everything that I learned as a paramedic, and then even live tissue training still didn't prepare me for what I saw in both countries.
I think it's tough for you guys because, we'll go, obviously we do the TCCC before we go downrange. We, do it all the time. And then obviously we had the SARC corpsmen, the SOC guys. And I'll take a SARC or a paramedic that has prior military law enforcement experience over a PA or sometimes doctors to perform either some type of short surgery or stitches, or I will take them in a heartbeat because I know what they've been through. I've seen their training. I watched them in difficult situations where they've had guys that had, double amputees or missing 3 limbs, and how they actually worked and assessed accordingly from head to toe. You're phenomenal individuals because you got to put yourself away to take care of what's in front of you. Sometimes that can be difficult, especially in the middle of a firefight. You got bullets swinging all over you and you're going, oh shit. But you keep your head, you take care of the patient, because that's what that person is in front of you. Not a friend, nothing like that. He's a patient. And you're taking care of that patient. So sometimes your feelings got to be pushed away until you get that patient taken care of. Then you go back and you're like, dude, so-and-so. And when you lose somebody, it's devastating. Like I said, there's a part in your book that I think is super significant, and we'll get into it as well. But there's a part in the book when you people get it, go, where can you get this at? Amazon and where else?
Barnes and Noble.
Yeah. Barnes and Noble. So we're not done with this conversation, just like you know. But there's a piece in this book that I think is essential to the entire book that brings us to the point where we're talking about suicide and we talk about demons and talking to somebody. Buy the book, read the book, and tell me, just email me and say, hey, Stu, I found it. I found what the piece you're missing. And I'll tell you both, well, Ed knows, but it was to me, very significant throughout the book because it took each caption or each time you've done a mission or something like that, it took that part and you kept it stored. So I'm sure you still have that item I'm talking about. You still have that item, Ed?
I still have some of the items, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, it kind of brings you that reminder. So when you got a demon, you can go to that item and you can look at it and say, here's why. Then you can put it away and go move on. And I'll tell you, out here, once we get off the air, we'll stay on for a couple minutes. But I think for me is that was significant because it's hard to stay over there that long after you've lost a friend or after, Al, when you get done treating somebody and it doesn't go the way it's supposed to go. That's heart-wrenching. But yet, you know what you got to do? You got to push more. Because if especially if you're stuck on an X, you get your stuff up, SOP it, get off the X as quick as possible. As you say all the time, push through this thing and be able to do what you need to do. But here's one of the big questions I have. And I want you two to be truthful with me. Don't lie to me. When you were in theater, how many guys you had that thought they were operators that wanted to be operators, but they just sucked? They weren't operators. They just were pieces of shit. That a lot, didn't it?
Yeah, there was a few, and that was, I hate to say it, but that was the beauty of that fighting season. It weeded them out. You know, they didn't like going through an ambush, except, you know, like going between on the run to Jalalabad. All of a sudden, your ambush isn't a point ambush where they're just hitting you at a junction. You're going 10 kilometers, and they're shooting at you and launching RPGs at you for 10K, like, you know, like they did a samurai a couple of times, you know, or going down to Ghazni, you're going through that Salar Syedabad area.
Yeah.
You know, the whole village is a kill zone. I mean, they did not like, and there were some people that they come back from that saying, this is not for me. I was like, man, tell you what, we got some static sites opened up here if you want to come on those. Yeah, sure. That way we didn't have to find somebody in. But that fight was that was an equalizer. That weeded out everybody. That weeded out all the wannabes.
Yeah, I think that's what my point is, that you have those, I talk about it all the time, the wannabes, or those that want to be like you or do the things you do, but they just can't. And there's for a reason. That's why they have kinds like yourself that, you know what, today's kind of boring. Let's go head down the Ring Highway or the Ring Road and go get in a firefight just for shits and giggles. I mean, that's the type of caliber you have in the agencies that you guys work for on the civilian side as federal contractors. You know, you have guys across all the military services, and I use this word pretty loosely, but special forces and all the services. You know, it's a different, unique individual to be in those units because of stuff like this. You're not with, 24 dudes in one patrol. You're with 4 dudes, 6 dudes, or 12 dudes. That's it. No more, no less. And if you don't have a good doc, the doc's your lifesaver, you're kind of screwed. So having the experience like with Al, to basically after, later on, you got to go, okay, you docs need to have this for each blowout kit, for each vehicle. And then you, Ed, going ahead and saying, hey, as a team leader, these are what my SOPs are. So when we do our rehearsals, here's how we're going to follow it. Yeah. It's just nice having that military experience, I think, to be a contractor. My personal opinion, I don't know because I've never been a contractor.
The happy medium for us is a lot like a thin blue line in law enforcement. You know, when they talk about a thin blue line, they're talking about how thin that line is. And the mindset for these operators was just as thin. That's why they're so easy to pick out. I mean, you have guys that are operators or, and they fall technically under that term. They run or freeze or they never show up again. That'll happen as soon as they have their first ambush. There's guys that were on country before I got there for 2 or 3 months, and but nothing happened to them the whole time they were there. And the very first time it happened, they're gone. So then they're going to say on the resume, yeah, I had 4 months in country, but they only got ambushed one time. And then on the other end of the spectrum is the guy that he can operate, but his head is just it's screwed on backwards. Their cowboy attitude, they want to run, they want to stand on the running board of a vehicle while it's moving and shooting, and that's not how it works, man. If you're that type of a person, you're aggressive. You're a negative asset to us because you're pissing Afghans off that normally aren't pissed off at you, and then the next time you roll through town, they go, "Oh, I remember those guys," and then they're gonna either do something to you or turn you over to the Taliban because of something that somebody did. I mean, throwing a water bottle is one thing, but shooting at somebody just for the hell of shooting at them, or thinking it's a joke to toss a flashbang out there, it's not doing the team any good.
No,
and we weeded those guys out as well. There was no tolerance for assholes.
Yeah, what brings you, what's funny, you were reading my notes, weren't you? Because my next thing was, how many guys did you have out there that had that cowboy attitude? That all they want to do is run and gun, and weren't that good at it, but they made it look like they were that good. I was standing, I want to make this look like Hollywood. Can I stand on the running boards while shooting an RPK going down the road? No, get back in the truck.
I didn't write about this, but there was one guy that was practicing a quick draw while he was driving in the fucking vehicle, and he shot himself in the leg, and we sent that motherfucker home. I mean, he ain't in the book because he doesn't deserve to be in the book.
It's no.
It's just,
yeah. There's some people we don't,
acknowledge.
Yeah.
When you're a shithead, though, you're dumb at. How many people don't? It's funny to me. As much as I shot, I had an ND when I was a second force. Me and Sparky were running a final drill on Friday. I didn't feel like picking up brass in my 45 jam. And I hit it. And when I hit it, I lost control. And I grabbed it around downrange. Condition 4, both my MP5 back in the day. My MP5, my 45, and walked off. And they're like, what's I just at an ND? Now, the old thing is there's those that have and those that will. It's just the way it is. But these guys that quick draw in the vehicles, or when I'm standing there kind of looking at their gun, I'm like, what the fuck you doing? Bam, shoot yourself in the foot. Had a guy in Guam do that. A SWAT guy. we let him shoot our 45s, our Musocs. He's kind of looking at it, and obviously you have that beaver tail selected and the safety off. And he's holding like this, and it's pretty nice. But bam, goes through his knee, through his foot. But he was sitting there playing with it when he was putting it down. It was kind of like in a kneeling thing. Yeah, it's just kind of why? What's the purpose for it? I mean, but the horror stories we hear on the the news or people talking, a lot of these horror stories, the reason they're talking about it is because it's true. This shit's happened. You've had people come out there and just start shooting over kids and ladies' hens that are in the field just to, to fuck with them. What's the purpose for that? Because at the end of the day, you need that. I need that local there to help me protect me. I mean, I know for, the Iraq, Southern Afghanistan, people I've talked to is get out there, know the villagers, give them some money, that we call it the slush fund. Give them some money, kind of settle them down. You take over a house, here's a couple $1,000. But then you
have that. If you remember that quote from Sonny Barger, Hell's Angels, you treat us bad, we'll treat you worse. You treat us good, we'll treat you better. Yeah. I think, and that was basically our mentality because we knew that we had to live with these people, we had to work with them, and if you treat them with respect because they deserve the respect. But if they disrespect you, then hell yeah, man, then it's on. Yeah. But you have to know that in advance. You're not out there looking for a fight. You're just there ready to fight. There's the difference.
Yeah, I think that's what I was alluding to is that being a contractor, you're a piece to push through certain parts without whether you're driving or you sit up in a fob, is making sure those people, the locals, because they don't give, they're in a bad place to begin with. We're in their country trying to, make the revolution go away and they don't give a shit. All they want to do is stop shooting and killing us, and we used to use the local populace all the time, especially in MRI affairs. We should go down there, the store right outside the governor's building where we had our fob. The people love this. They even let us know that, hey, something's happening today or something's going to happen tonight. We had kind of an idea. But again, to treat the people like shit in the area you're in, guess what? They're going to shit on you all day long. You'll never get them.
Big time.
Yeah. But next point, these shark teams. I'm trying to figure out, when I was reading the book, I was trying to figure out the difference, the shark team and what you guys actually did, your teams. What was the difference between a shark team and what you guys were actually doing?
The shark teams were actual PSD teams in Iraq.
Okay.
They operated out of Baghdad by DECOR from the Bull program. I mean, I was one of the trainers for them working for Al was actually one of
it's got soundbite problems. He's coming across garbled.
You doing?
Oh,
Hey,
really?
how far are you away from your speaker, brother?
Geez, I'm like pretty close to it.
Okay, there you go. I got you.
Okay. Yeah, the Shark teams were an actual PSD team. They moved people from point A to point B in Baghdad and around Iraq.
Okay.
They worked for DynCorp. They were a part of the SIPOL program. Al was actually one of the medics on one of the Shark teams. I was one of the trainer and evaluators working for Crucible, but we were contracted by DynCorp to train up the Shark teams.
Right.
So that's the Shark teams. What we did in Afghanistan was convoy security. We moved the mail, and we moved secure loads for another client downrange. The mail was pretty much set onto a few other drop sites, but the other client was all over the country. I mean, we were all the way out to Herat, down to Lashkar, Kandahar, up to Mazar Sharif, Kunduz once or twice. We got all over the country with the mobile teams. But once again, we really weren't protecting people. The only people we were protecting were ourselves.
Right.
We were just moving low.
Yeah. In the car. And I think, too, that the difference between what I got a thought here. I'm looking at my notes and trying to engage as well. Is that the difference between the PSDs were basically just taking clients, personnel to base, or whether it's a general or somebody from the RCD. Yeah. And then what you guys are doing with the cargo, protecting, the log train, basically the same thing with the mail. I think that I was going somewhere with this, but I'll digress and come back to it.
I can tell you, I'll tell you what I know about PSD is that probably 90% of the private military companies or contractors did their own PSD. The Shark teams were a premier PSD team. In other words, there were other companies that used us, high-ranking military officials, VIPs, because of the reputation of the Shark teams. I mean, we were fast. We moved in unison. We drove in Department of State offset. We utilized offensive driving skills, tactical driving skills, and they were highly trained individuals. Those guys might have had, different training here, different training there, but when the Crucible gets hold of them, they put it all together. And it's not just an evolution here or an evolution there. It's evolutions that combine into a comprehensive a drill that involved everything from shooting, getting off the X, cross-decking, tactical tire changes. I mean, those guys were good at it. And we did it on a regular basis for a number of years successfully. We didn't lose any clients. And,
Right.
And that's what the Shark teams are. They're the guys that do PSD. They get in a vehicle, they get a client, and then they move from point A to point B, and they get there. That's pure luck. Where it's a lot different than when you're doing it for the right reasons, and you're avoiding certain things and going certain ways, and you're deviating your routes, and you have alternative routes, and all the planning that goes into it is extremely detailed.
Right.
A lot of people don't realize that, but the Shark teams were probably the best.
Yeah. So you were talking earlier about the your clients. So you guys were over there. Euro said DoD contract, and then while you were in theater, you had other agencies contract you guys out as well on top.
Yeah, we had one that it was called Bearing Point that was a bunch of attorneys that we had to drive around, and they were doing settlements when, let's say, Army drops a flare, from a helicopter and a house catches on fire. These people, they would file a claim, and of course we'd have to take these attorneys out there, and they would do an assessment and pay them off, just to keep things down. That's not a Department of State contract. That's a private contract.
Right.
And then there's non-governmental agencies like PARSA, you said, Chemonics, CHF, Community Housing Foundation. Those are non-governmental organizations that require transportation. I did PSD for a guy that was a curator in Al-Hilla in Babylon, and they were doing a Babylon restoration project. This guy carried like $30,000-$40,000 in cash everywhere he went. And it was like we were protecting the money, not so much the guy.
The human being, yeah.
He's monitoring all these local nationals that are restoring these projects. And that's an individual client. That's an example of an individual client that's there temporarily. They require this type of protection, this type of transportation, and that's how we got it. It was based on reputation. So
What's it sounds like while you're in theater, because you're actually over there under this contract, which has to be State Department sanctioned. And while you're in theater, you have other private entities that are contacting your company saying, "Hey, I want Al's team to come with me to take me from point A to point B," whatever that is. That's what I was trying to get for the listeners, that while you're in theater under this umbrella contract, there's other ways that the company makes money with independent or private clients while you're still in theater. So basically, they're double dipping. They're making double the money off, but they're not paying you double, obviously. But,
well, they're not marketing for it. That's for sure. I know they're not seeking contracts when they're already obligated to one, but just based on reputation alone, that's where people say, "Hey, I would rather move with these guys. I would rather go with these guys." So it's like we were a lot faster. The military, they move in convoy, but a guy, you got a colonel or a general or something like that has to get to some place. He doesn't want to dick around driving at an MRAP pace when we can be driving at a Tahoe pace.
So you had Tahoes in Afghanistan and F-550s in Afghanistan. Tahoes were in Iraq?
Yeah, Tahoes and Suburbans in Iraq. We had Hilux and Land Cruisers as some of our B6 Land Cruisers that we used for PSD, because, again, we had to do PSD and convoy operations in Afghanistan because you got to move people back and forth from the airport to the hotel and whatnot. So that, that all requires a PSD. So we had a PSD element at SOC in Afghanistan.
Right. So it just seems like it's kind of tough. You guys go out and do a mission under your umbrella contract, come back, and the boss comes in and says, "Hey, we got this other contract just came up. You got 24 hours. We're going to wherever, whatever the case may be." It's got to be difficult for you guys going like, "Shit, we just got off the road, man. We've been on the road for 4 days."
It wasn't, like sometimes you would, all right, hey, you going up the bar room. All right, shoot, we'll just go up the bar room and we'll just hang out on the base for while the client does their business up in bar room. And, we'll load up the back of the Hilux or the back of the Land Cruiser with all our goodies we bought at the PX.
Pogie, here it comes, the Pogie store.
Yeah. And then all of a sudden, the clients are like, "Hey, can we go?" Oh, I guess we can go by the PX.
Oh, like, oh, darn. Hey, sir, we're pressing time, but okay, we'll go. We'll go. All right. Let's get some other, since the humor's going. I read the part about Drew and his shit fest that he had within his vehicle. Yes. So I want you to, for me to explain it on air is kind of, it would take away from.
No, that dude was in Drew's team.
Okay.
Yeah,
you're right.
Yeah, that dude was in Drew's team, and he must have had like some GI stuff going on, and no kidding. Anytime we stopped, boom, he was running out. He was just pissing out his ass essentially. And I guess one time it was right there during an ambush. He jumps out of the vehicle, the ambush kicks off, and he's like, "I'm here now. I'm just gonna finish."
Do I say?
Yeah, he finishes, he jumps back in the vehicle. The convoy gets moving while they get shot at.
And I'm always looking at it from the pathophysiological side point. You go in and you stop off on the side of the road. We're going to fuel up, and the guy goes in and he reaches in a ice cooler, grabs a Red Bull, and then opens it up, takes a drink. Well, how many fucking dirty hands have been in that fucking cooler? Where'd that water come from that made that ice? And what they're basically drinking is E. coli, all kinds of other nasty ass diseases, and next thing you know, you're down. And it's, it all comes down to what you eat, when you eat it, how you eat it, and I got to take care of these guys. And so I tell them all the time. I have one guy that had the shits and he wanted to take medicine to stop the shits, and I go, if you do that, Harold, that's the only way it's going to get out of your body. If you stop that, it's going to come the other direction. And sure enough, he stops, the diarrhea stops, and then he starts puking. And so, you kind of have to balance those two escape mechanisms, so to speak, just to keep the guy on the road. So
no, it's what's funny about it is that just to get our docs and our teams when it comes time to medical stuff, when you're out in the field, you know, your hands dirty, use sanitation, all that stuff. We're some dirty fuckers. That's just the way it is. You know, I'm thirsty. I'm getting water. I don't give a shit how it works. But our docs are like, don't do this or don't do it. Change your socks. But now when you're out partying and having a great time, who's the first one at the table? The doc. It's always the same. He's always the guy out there. He's the wildest, running across the bars and, you know, chasing all the women and stuff. Or our docs, our corpsmen. But it's just comical. Hey, dude, here's some real shit paper. Make sure you use wipes or stuff like that. Obviously, the big thing for us in Afghanistan or Iraq to make sure.
You want to hear about the mistake I made?
Yes, I would.
Okay, so I drank Red Bull. I don't like drinking coffee. I have like Red Bull. That's my vice. And so I buy a case of Red Bull and shit. And next thing you know, all my gunners in the back are drinking my fucking Red Bull. And so what I did was I had a case of water in the back for the gunners and a case of Red Bull in the front. And then the second time I left the blast door open and they drank my fucking Red Bull. So I ran a mission with the blast door closed and the Red Bull up front. And we got caught in an ambush that lasted like 30 minutes. And so, and I'm on adrenaline and I'm drinking Red Bull and I'm thirsty as shit and I'm drinking more Red Bull. And next thing you know, I overdosed on Red Bull because I didn't have no fucking water in the front of the cab like a dumbass. And so now you take Red Bull that's going to up your metabolism, it's going to up your heart rate, and then you got adrenaline that's upping your heart rate. And what happened when that ambush was over, I stood up and I fell right over it. I must have knocked over a bolted table off the ground, man. I swear to God, I hit like a bag of rocks. And they want to know what happened to the doc, and they're looking for gunshot wounds. They're looking for bullet holes and all kinds of stuff like that. And I just OD'd on Red Bull.
No, so it's that that and the gun we had and stuff like that. You tell, your doc, hey, don't drink so much, your blood pressure will go up. You're going to have a massive stroke or heart attack. Because when you're in that fight,
you don't think it.
No, you don't. But see, again, the doc is the one drinking all that damn Red Bull. He had adrenaline dump. He passes out from it. But now if we did it, you can't do that. Drink water and augment. Wait, you just fell the fuck out, didn't you?
Yeah, you know what? I just ended up keeping the blast door open and re-upping on the supply of Red Bull. And corporate would get pissed off that I spent the money on that stuff, and they would pay for it, what you could buy and what you could spend your operational cash funds on. Because we used to, get Red Bull and chips and stuff like that. They said from now on you can't do this.
Yeah, I'd say this in your book. You tell about what's the name? Rector?
Yeah,
Rector. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, again, and we talked about it earlier before we went on air, is that you're going to have the callers. Their whole job is, one, to making sure that the numbers match up for big boys and that you're taking care of. My assumption is you're taking care of here with whatever the operational fund is, whatever it is. But at some point, you have to have niceties for those guys in the field. I don't give a shit who you are. And if it has to come out of an operational fund to support that, why not? But again, it comes down to, it's a political thing. It comes down to dollars and cents.
Well, and Ed, when Ed went up into ops, he managed a lot of that stuff. And the weird thing about that is he controls those expenditures. So you get your operational cash. You're responsible for winning these receipts. All this stuff, it has to balance out. On the Afghanistan side of things, we never really had our thumb on the pulse, so to speak, or our finger on the pulse, because of the fact that these guys would tell you that an expedition fee or a licensing fee or something like that would cost X amount of money, and then they would pay that to the colonel, and then the colonel would go and pay the Ministry of Interior, or what we call the Ministry of Insurgency. They would pay them that money just to move that paperwork up to the front. But who's to say that $20,000 for an operational license or an arming authority was only maybe $2,000? How much of that was actually going in else's pocket? That's what we didn't control. But when it came to operational funds, Ed, he put pen to paper and kept that tally going.
Yeah, just fine. Because you mentioned the colonel in your book, how he was an Afghan. You didn't know if he was going to take or not, but he had a lot of insight and certain things that he would take care and help you win. But we all know, I don't give a shit who you are, Eastern Bloc, third world countries, there's no such thing as a truth. Deception is the biggest thing in all those countries, whether you're in Iraq, Afghanistan, Asia. I don't give a shit, because that's the way they live. That's their normal life. They don't know what it's like to have an outside entity come in and think that we're trying to help them and get them better, make their life easier.
It's a necessary evil.
Yeah, exactly. So sometimes you got to pay those big colonels that are, Afghanis, and they got big pools throughout the country to allow you to get your taxes, allow you to get the ability to carry your guns in theater. Because people don't know this. When you go into a foreign country, I don't give a shit, it's the military or it's contracting, there's certain paperwork that's got to be filed through the State Department and filed through the country to enter into that country. You're like, when we had Iraq and Afghanistan, you need an entry saying, okay, yes, you can come in and help us, whatever that is. That's
ITAR regulation. Yeah.
I was trying to think of ITAR, but at the end of the day, that's just how it works. People are going to ask you, and you got to ask permission to go to somebody else's country to go fuck them up. Hey, I'm going to come in. You mind if I do that? That's just the way the politics are. It's just the way it is. I think for me, because I never had the thought when I retired, because I was too damn broken, never had the thought to go contract. I'll be honest, I didn't have the balls. I figured I was down range enough. You couldn't pay me enough to go back down range to get shot at again. And, I just couldn't do it. Maybe because I couldn't walk either, but I just couldn't do it. It's the end of the day. But I want to read a quote out of your book here on page 99. So listeners, when you buy the book, you can go here. It basically says, the rule of SOC, never turn your back or walk in front of any L&N. Keep him in your line of sight at all times. Now, what I find significant about that specific capture is that you don't know who the enemy is. You're thinking they're friendly, especially A&A. The enemy out there, you don't know who they are. You got on the range and you're shooting. You need to be behind that line. You need to have guys in each corner of that line with rifles. And then you have to have at least 3 or 4 dudes behind that line, because guess what they were doing? They were turning on us while we were teaching them and shooting us.
Yeah.
So, again, that's in the military. Now, the contractors saying the same thing. Hey, man, you can't trust these fuckers. But you got to make sure you keep it in line of sight. Make sure you got your peripheral run on, head on the swivel, as we always say. But there was a reason for that. You have any experience where that kind of comes into play with you guys?
We had that problem with the Taliban infiltrated a gunner into one of the teams. This local, he was from the Logar province, and we were always doing runs down to Shank and Gardez. So we put him on the Logar runs. We put him on the Shank Gardez runs, and he had a cell phone, and he would call his cousins or whoever, hey, I'm in the 3rd grade gun truck, so don't shoot at that one. Boom. So they'd light up the first 2 gun trucks. Well, we caught on quick. So what would happen was Jeff Bedford, the team leader, he let this guy make his phone call from like the 3rd, and he was in the 3rd gun truck. Then he stopped the convoy before they left the city, pulled him out, searched him down, took his cell phones, put him in the 1st gun truck, and then they drove down there to they did. Sure, the 3rd gun truck did not get lit up, but this kid was now up in the fleet gun truck getting shot at, and Edward Bob tosses him his phone and says, "Now go to your cousin. They just lit you up." And sure, this shit was him on the phone crying to somebody. Oh my God! And they kept on doing that with him. They'd always stop any convoy he was on. They would stop the convoy, take his cell phone from him, put him in a different gun truck. Finally, he's like, "No, man, this is going to catch up to me." He quit.
Yeah, I wonder why. I mean, it's difficult. I know
by his cousins.
Well, even for us, when we took guys out, whether our interpreters, we took other L&Ns with us to go do a certain mission, whatever that is, we took their cell phones. We flipped the shit out of those guys, and they were kind of like, "Well, look, dude, you're going with me," and I made sure you were top to bottom, everything in between. If I said my finger up your ass and check your ass, I was doing it. Because we found, like you guys did, that some of those L&Ns, they were bought out by the Taliban. Now, just to kind of shoot the listeners to understand, Iraq kind of dimmed down around 8, 9, 10 time frame. The reason was we killed all the dumb shits in Iraq. All the smart shits went to Afghanistan.
Yeah.
And that's where they stood to fight. Bottom line is how it worked. Kicked everybody's ass in Iraq. That was the dumb fuckers. The smart dudes went to Afghanistan and came in numbers. Because they used Iraq as a kind of like a playground or playbook. What worked, what didn't work. And then they went to Afghanistan and caused freaking multiple havoc. It was just, well, I know a lot of guys with that.
In defense of the proxy shooter, or the proxy killer. There are guys that they don't want to kill you. They're technically they're not the enemy, but when the Taliban kidnaps their family members and they beat them and they threaten to kill them and they're doing it out of loyalty to their family as opposed to technically the sworn enemy of America, so to speak. But I have to kind of feel for them because now they're put in this situation where, yeah, this wouldn't happen if I wasn't working for these guys. But the Taliban leveraged that through extortion, and so a lot of times these guys they don't want to be shooters. They're not warriors. They're not out there, but they're the kind of like the unseen enemy because they've already been cleared. They've already been vetted. They're working there. They know the inner workings of a compound. Who's coming, who's going, what time things are going on, and sometimes it's not just proxy shooting, it's intel, and so they keep these guys around for a while, and then when they get done using them, they say, okay, listen, if you don't kill as many people as possible, we're going to go ahead and light up your family, that type of thing. And it's like that's how it happens, and it happens a lot in Afghanistan. It didn't happen to us quite as often, but we knew about it. We had incidences that were warning signs for us. You talked about frisking somebody to take their cell phone off. We had to search these vehicles too. These guys would come up with innovative places to stash. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if a driver had a cell phone up his ass.
Yeah,
because no matter how many times we searched, they still had drugs, they still had cell phones, they still had comms. It was just it's almost impossible to do that. So that's one of the things that we do is we keep them separate. When it came to OPSEC, we did our own details, our own briefs, and if we talked to the team, then we'd mix it up. We'd leave at a different time. We'd leave out of a different cape. We'd take a different route. We would never tell anybody. We'd just go, and the only person that knew that was the team leader.
right.
And so,
It's the way it had to be. You can't in theater, regardless of where you're at, any conflict, you can't divulge the information to your carry-ons. If your team or your platoon or your how you work in it, is to make sure your boys, because we know we're trustworthy. We're there doing the same thing, trying to save each other's lives and not get killed. But you bring in L&Ns in, local nationals, and to be part of your team, if you're doing a leader's recon or you're going to go 7-5 or do a sniper hide, you're not going to tell them what's going on because for a flying fact, because of this, you don't know if the Taliban or the insurgents got that family, and they're basically out there drilling them, so they're getting information from us talking over here, and they're telling them. I mean, you got to be honest. If it was my family, you're fucking right. I'd be telling shit on you guys. I'd be telling them whatever the hell they wanted. You better pay me for it. Goddamn right, because I'm not losing my family. And that's, to me, we put those countries, those individuals that weren't part of the fight, in such jeopardy the entire time we were there. And I can tell from personal experience, some of the people we had in Iraq were phenomenal. I mean, we had 2 Terps that, I'm telling you right now, there's 1 Terp. If it wasn't for that Terp, we'd have quite a few guys from 3rd Recon Battalion to be dead right now. But once in a while, you get those guys. But then again, you get this cast that you drive down the road, you should be Miami, and all of a sudden we're in a gunfight. Like, there's nothing out here. No one knows what's going on out here. So it's hard. Now, what I want to do, and if it gets too much, you tell me to shut up and I'll go fucking color somewhere. But what I want to talk about is your chapter of Exfil. And the reason why I bring this up is that during that chapter, seeing it, what happened to you, and then the lack of support that you did get. To have to go out there and be able to sustain the way you did, and I want both of you to chime in on this, sustain the way you did through that entire engagement, and not having your dust off or medevac, whatever you call it, or not having a possibility of getting air support or a predator or something over to kind of help you out. You guys remember what I'm talking about?
yeah, I wouldn't walk on that. That was Buddha that was on that.
I was the talk on that.
I know a lot about it because we've talked about it in detail. But I'll let Ed tell that story.
Go ahead. But doing our run to Organee and then to Skin, what happened though on the way to Organee was we hit that IED. My lead vehicle hit the IED with Scott Brown in it, and it killed the interpreter instantly, blew him out of the vehicle. We already talked about that. And then as we're running up towards the vehicle, me and Buddha, Scott Brown gets out of the vehicle. he had no body armor on because the blast just ripped. He didn't have wraparound. He just had on plate, and it just blew off his chest plate. So he grabbed his AK and he ran up the hill. Mind you, he still has that broken back and those 2 fractures in his pelvis.
Right.
So we get in, and during this time, I'm on the phone to the TOC, and I'm saying, hey, activate the medevac plan. I've got a vehicle down. I've got men down. And what happened was it never happened because of a corporate, something at the corporate level. They didn't sign the right paperwork and commit the funds. We were never going to get that helicopter to come in here and get the casualties out. I didn't know that at the time, but what I did know was we had to get off the X.
Right.
So after I dropped Scott off at the bumper and Buddha starts taking care of him, I look at the GPS. We're closer to Organy than we were to Sharona. So now we have to push to Organy, but now we're staying in the riverbed now to stay off the road because we didn't know if we're going to hit another IED.
Right.
No, we're rock hopping, and every time that vehicle's going back and forth, Scott's screaming in pain. And he had about 10. Buddha told me he gave him the max amount allowable of morphine.
Morphine. Yeah.
10 milligrams.
And I got
10 milligrams.
yeah, anything more than that, he would have stopped breathing. So now we're pushing out, and it is a lonely feeling there. You're like, fuck, man, we're on our own now. I'm calling up the client, and they would not come into that valley. They would not launch their QRF into that valley. I'm like, geez, thanks, man.
Well, did they release him to 800 meters outside the front gate of that Thornad?
Yeah.
Yeah.
A hard fall.
Yeah.
So we're in a stream bed this whole time, rock hopping, and then we come to an area where there's a traffic jam of oncoming traffic, and my new team leader of the gunners, he's like, stop, and then so we stop. He and I get out of the vehicle and we're looking. I mean, you can see like it didn't look right. There were wires sticking out of the ground and people were avoiding it. We're like, that's where there's an IED. So
Right.
I go, all right, we're going to go this way where all the civilian traffic's going. So we just had to wait till it thinned out. We made our move. We got through there. Yeah, but it was a shitty feeling knowing that because the paperwork wasn't signed, those guys had to suffer more.
Well, that's the point I bring that whole thing up with your exfil chapter is that government contracting is a different world than being in the military in that conflict. Before I leave the wire, I either have route clearance with me. I already have my dust off plan done, so I know exactly if shit goes bad. Close air support if I need it. Is there any predators going to be in that area? We have all that locked on.
Yeah.
When I get into, I'm in route or I'm getting to my fob, I know this stuff's en route. But for contractors, again, if the right paper's not signed to get the right approval for this company, this is a civilian company, can get this type of support. It's just why? You're in that theater doing the same thing we're doing. You're just getting paid more goddamn money. That's it.
Yeah.
The only difference you think about it.
Well, yeah, that's a lot less support.
Yeah, and I think too, the U.S. companies that were over there. Yeah, there were some Australian companies and brick companies, other stuff, but the U.S. companies, because of our relationship that we had, because you ran to somebody, whether it was Iraq or Afghanistan, that you can tell me, is that you knew somebody in that theater from your time in the Marine Corps.
Oh yeah.
And that's a good point of making. Yeah,
I remember we were working with DGI up in Herat, and Frank Mercer, Derek Durbin were up there at Camp Milan.
yeah.
And I ran into them, and boom, and I mean I'm like the go-between between DGI because they were posting some clients because they were trying to stimulate the economy. That was their whole thing.
Right.
With other means like growing saffron or growing something else, or not poppy, and stimulate the trade, and that was their whole big thing. And I was able to get these guys, the DGI guys, in with the MARSOC guys up there, and they were able to coordinate support for their venues and their events while they were up there in Herat. using block, and I guess from what I understand, both parties loved it. They both benefited from it. So
We did too in Iraq. I mean, Ed Lynch, you obviously remember Ed Lynch.
Yeah.
So Merle Lynch, came into my CP when I was the ops chief at Third. And they were looking for certain things, and they said, "Hey, what can we do?" All we did is went to the RCT, said, "Look, we're going to bring these guys under our umbrella for this particular op, obviously, and we're going to share intel." I'll tell you what, for the next 3 months or 4 months, we were out there because we were jumping and doing other stuff. That was probably the best link up because we knew those guys, but we were able to help them support with our predators. If we were to leave, they were trying to leave behind us or in front of us prior to the route clearance or getting route clearance. So it was nice because we all know these guys. We've been on float with them. We drank beer with them. We broke bread together. It's just a great feeling knowing your guys are out there. But for me, the hard part was they weren't getting support. Like that piece in the Exco, you think you have all the stuff, and shit goes bad, and you got your asses in the wind, which brings me to the point of never leave a man behind. But obviously, you write in the book about somebody that was left behind because of somebody that wasn't thinking, somebody wasn't concerned enough to make sure that boy was going to get in a truck regardless of what happened.
he was one of those types that never should have been there. I think he had because Chris Vail was my buddy, and what happened was before that we did the run to Skin when I just picked him up as ATA. This was in July 2010, and I remember Rector telling me, "Hey, you got to go back to Skin." I was like, "Oh fuck!" And I mean, everybody that was in the room thought I was going to quit. I saw my face go white. I was like, "All right," because remember the last time I was in there, I lost 2 guys. So I was like, "All right, I got to get to Phoenix, do some coordination." So I get over to Camp Phoenix, call down to Sharona because I knew they had the route clearance team there, and I was talking to the lieutenant, the platoon commander of the route clearance. It just so happens they were clearing that route right at the same time we were going to be coming in and out of the valley. I was like, all right. So we're setting up, I'm giving them, we're setting up phone numbers off of the Nokias and everything else. And day of the mission, I roll in there by pure luck. There's this one lieutenant sitting out there. I was like, we stopped the convoy. I walk out to him and I was like, "Hey, I'm a lieutenant. I forget his name." I was like, "Sir, I'm Ed Ford. We spoke on the secure net on the stew, as a matter of fact."
Yeah, stew.
Yeah. So we're shaking hands and we're chatting for a few minutes. And he's like, "You know what? I got the Apaches upstairs too. They're going to keep an eye on you guys." I was like, "Oh yes."
Again, it comes down to who this whole thing, let's take I'm not supposed to talk, but let's take politics out of this shit. Take it away. Yourself and Al and myself, if we're in a theater and we meet up, guess what we're going to do? Help each other so we all survive. So when we come back, in a year or two, we're sitting there drinking a beer at some local tavern or a reunion, and we're kind of just talking about these are stories. The thing about this book, what's great about it, it's a big story from your tour that you two know each other from the time of 2004, correct? Up till you finished the book. So, I mean, the amount of years that are involved in this book alone, it's just a memory for you. And the reason I say that is that your item that you have, I'm going to call it a demon box because it's something like what I have. It just reminds you of what your life was prior to today. It reminds you what you did for a living. Like you two now are very successful still within your communities. I mean, Christ, Al, you're a paramedic, firefighter. I mean, and you're still running Mach 9, and you're an old fucker too. I thought I was old, but you're older than I didn't realize that how old you were. But at the end of the day, that's what keeps you going. That's where, if something's going bad, when you lose somebody downrange, or you lose a good friend in a firefight, you don't have time to mourn right there. You don't. Your job is now to get off that goddamn X, make sure everybody's safe, consolidate, disseminate, and go. Move. We got to go. And that's when everything gets bad. That's when the point we talk about all the time about suicide awareness. For me, it was tough because I'm a senior guy. And as these kids were being killed on our run, hey, who do I talk to? Who do I go mourn with? Yeah. So like yourself, we take an item and put it in that item I'm talking about. In order way to figure out, folks, I'm not going to tell you unless you buy this book, period, is that it allows you in the future If things are bad, you can open that piece up, that item up, and go, you know what? This is a memory, not a good one, but it's a memory that I need to cherish. And I'm sure too, if you get, I mean, even now, get bad, Al. You got, in other words, you're right, you know, you have bad days. Who do you talk to when you have bad days? Just somebody in the fire department you can relate to or relates to you? Or something like that? Or you and Ed get on the phone and chit chat?
Him or Mike Hardy would be the first person I called if I was having an issue. I mean, there's guys that I go to in the fire department, and then of course we have that traditional critical incident stress management mechanism that's available. But you know, I'm never gonna end up using those services. You know, writing the book was therapeutic for both of us, I think.
Oh, sure.
But you know, we always had every mission always had a submission. I used this analogy previously in another podcast, but I'll go ahead and repeat it now. It's when a stone hits the water, it leaves a ripple effect. When we lost guys, it was a fucking tsunami. It wasn't a ripple.
It's in the book too.
Yeah, and that's why I said it, is because it's one thing to have to grieve for a guy. It's another thing to withhold that grief, you know, to accomplish the task at hand. And it's a little bit more, you know, it's worse because you're sitting there holding it back because you got this other job to do, and it gets compounded. It gets worse and it gets worse and it gets worse. And how are you gonna deal with that? You know, we've lost a couple of guys post contract that had issues, and you know, you know, we talked to them, but we weren't picking up on these cues, you know, garbled text messages or fractured text messages, and run-on sentences, and just repetitive words, and it was like slurred speech writing. And it's, hey man, is everything okay? And that's the worst question you can ask somebody, because they're going to deny it. They're going to say, I'm fine. And then you find out that they're gone, and you start wondering about whether or not you could have done something different. And so now we're beating the shit out of ourselves trying to figure out, God dang, man, why didn't the guy reach out? Well, I reach out. And if you're that kind of person, you're not going to suffer from this shit. If I got an issue, I call Ed. If Ed's got an issue, he calls me. Mike's got an issue, he calls, you know, any number of us. It's like that clusterfuck of phone calls. You know what I'm saying? We might have 10 guys with shit going on at the same time, and everybody's trying to call everybody else, and nobody's getting through. But you know, that's how we deal with it. You know?
Yeah. What's funny you say that is that the unfortunate part is I don't know if you remember Steve O'Hara, Ed. He was a recon guy, Steve O'Hara. He was a second recon battalion. I think he went to the second force, but he was in the recon community. He just passed of cancer and at Thanksgiving Day. So since that day till present, between the phone calls I get, the text messages I get probably 12 a day, coordinating, and that's what these guys are doing, coordinating to go to his funeral and viewing, and setting up a separate event during the time they're there to bring everybody together so we can kind of sit down. And the therapeutic part of this whole thing, especially books like this, is that it gives you that flashback, but you realize that, hey, you're not the only person out there who's got this issue.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm sure, you know, between the two of you, when we talk to people, I know I do, is that, look, you're not alone out there. Today could be the worst day of your life, you think, but you saw it tomorrow. You can't change yesterday because yesterday's done.
Yep.
You can do what you can today to affect what you can today to maybe help you be successful tomorrow. But you got to figure that out. You know, I tell everybody the vocabulary word no. Get it out of your vocabulary. Now, I got some ridicule when I said this before, so I'm going to say it and clarify it. What I mean by no is using the word no not to work, or no to solve a problem, or no for an issue. Yeah, obviously no is a strong word in other instances, so we'll just leave it at that so people know that where I'm coming from. But, you know, for you guys, you've been on both ends of the spectrum, military side, the contracting side. The problems or the demons are the freaking same across the board, whether you're a fucking military guy, a contractor, law enforcer. That's why I talk about the 5 pillars. You know, those 5 pillars are what makes us go around. This book is what allows guys like me to get joy about, hey, the other people got demons, and how it's articulated within this book. It's phenomenal.
Yeah, I got one of the best reviews I got. I don't know if Ed saw it or not, but this guy told me, he said, man, I was at a dark place, and I got your book, and I could hear, smell, and taste everything you wrote. And when he said that, it's, I used to talk about, I could fly, aside from doing that little spiral landing into Iraq, but I could be blindfolded and land in Iraq and know I was there just by the smell of it. Afghanistan was the same thing. You could smell the shit in the air type of a thing. You knew where you were. And so this guy, for him to say that, that was, I think that the way we described things or the way that was written really helped him bring back those memories that were good for him. And
Yeah.
I think the book was positive for him because he was there when we were there. He just wasn't a part of it, but it brought back life to him, and he thanked me for it. And I have to send it to you, Ed, if you hadn't seen it.
Yeah. Send it to me. I haven't seen it yet.
And I think too, what's good about it is that there's people out there that are, I'm hoping when they see this podcast, understand that this book is more than just to talk, relate to your own demons. This book has what actually it's like to be a contractor in a foreign country, providing the same services the military are doing, but we're under a SOFA agreement and the Geneva Convention, where these guys are under contract in a foreign country. Difference. They're phenomenally, they're well skilled. They have whatever it takes, jack of all trades, master of none. That's those guys. But the loopholes, the politics behind you getting into theater, can I get my Beagles here? Where am I flying to? I'm flying to Dubai, or I'm flying to Kuwait. From Kuwait, am I flying them into Iraq or Afghanistan? What am I doing? Huge difference in contracting world. Because you guys got to make sure State Department gets this. How many guns? How much radio equipment? Like your radio equipment, was it in theater when you got there, or you have to bring it with you because you're encryption?
No, it was already, when we would get it, it would usually get shipped in. Like when the program was started to expand, SOC would ship it all in. And then our comm guys in the talk, they would load all the crypto in the, and it was a very basic crypto, but I mean, I swear to God, I mean, you would swear you had people listening in that shouldn't be listening in.
Well, I'm sure that well, it's like today, if these guys are going down range, I mean, everything's on a smartphone now.
Yeah.
I'm gonna call it this, and I have beer can antennas for SATCOM. Individual SATCOM is, the technology from when this whole thing started, 2001 until present, has grown expeditiously. I mean, it's ridiculous. The other thing I love about this book too, if you go to the appendix, all the abbreviations that you talk about within the book, if you don't understand, they're in the book. They're in the back. They tell you exactly what a TOC is, Tactical Operations Center. We call them ROCs, Recon Operations Centers. Dedication to the men that you lost while you're there. The dedication to the Chinese female who was killed in the bombing. I mean, I think
Spinnies.
Yeah.
No, it was Spinnies was one bombing, and then the China Hotel was across from that, where we.
Yeah, Spinnies was your grocery store. Right?
Spinnies was a grocery store.
Yeah. So
that was the restaurant.
You would put that in the book. I think you humanize these people. You make them, hey, they're real. They're things that these people took care of us on the side, and mentioning them in the book. I think for like the ones that pass, it's great that I'm sure hopefully their families know, but it's just nice that you included them as well. Because that's gotta suck. You go to the Chinese hotel or Spinnies or some of the other, and you think you're being targeted, as you mentioned in the book. But I mean, it's gotta suck. Because
I think Mike had a hard time with it, not because he knew her, but he kind of felt it was like his fault because they were targeting us when that thing got bombed.
Right.
And so you've got, what do you call that? Survivor's guilt or whatever.
Yeah, survivor's guilt. Yeah.
And so that tore on him because, it would have never happened if I hadn't hooked up and got us all that gig there. And, and I've just gone, don't do that to yourself, man. It's not just about the friendships. It's just shit's going to happen, man. It's a bad world,
Yeah. And you're in a conflict. Part of you going over there in the conflict is the possibility of not coming home or losing people that you work with that are L&Ns over there. It's part of it. And I know it sucks. We say this all the time. We're only going to say it. It sucks, but it's part of the job.
Yeah, it's
to part
you just gotta. I mean, what I would do. Hey, this is what we signed. We knew what we were getting into when we signed that contract. You use little things like that to keep going.
There was a lot of collateral damage, and and it was interesting. Like when one of the chapters we had to take out of the book was post 2012, and a lot of that stuff that we wrote about was classified. So we ended up having to delete something like 8 chapters in the book that would have been even more interesting reading.
Yeah.
But, at Shank, we had a mission to deliver the mail, get in and get out. But when that gate got breached, we went into a rescue mode. So me and a couple of guys are pulling people out of the rubble pile. We got other guys that are manning gun trucks outside the wire because the MRAPs are gone, and now we're protecting that fob.
Right.
And it's twofold. One, because we didn't want to get stuck in the fob while it was being mediated. We wanted to get out of Dodge, and so if we're on the outside, they can't keep us in. Once the MRAPs show up, we can take off. That kind of a thing. But they utilized us for medical assets. They utilized us for transportation, moving bodies back and forth, search and rescue. It was like a mission on top of a mission. But, we're not just going to sit back and say, okay, well, when can we leave?
Or say, that's not part of my contract.
Yeah. I didn't sign up for that
But it's, yeah.
yeah.
I used to hear that shit when I was, they come to the office and like, oh, hey, Tom, such and such. I'm like, what? What's not part of our contract? What the fuck? If you're going down the road with us, that's what you're doing. What we freaking do. If not, you're not going with us.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not part of your job. Me sitting in this damn room.
What's cool for us is when you have guys that know their jobs and they also have the initiative to do other things. So when you go into a fob and you drop your load, you got a team leader going to the B doc getting intel. You got your medic going to the battalion aid station grabbing med kit. You got some of your third country nationals going to the cafeteria, grab chow for everybody else. And then you've got even other guys that are hooking up with other guys. When you've talked about knowing people in theater and getting favors done, if we didn't know somebody, we introduced ourselves.
Yeah.
We made it known. And so, there were times when Chris Rector would give us printers. We've got printers, and we would drop off these printers for the Army guys because they didn't have any way to print. And you know what? A printer turns into 2 stretchers. I can use those on the outside of that vehicle, a printer turns into some IFAC kits or some med supply and stuff like that. So yeah, we bartered, and like I said, we begged, borrowed, and stole medical supplies. I'm going to go ahead and say that I stole.
Acquire, you tactically acquired that now. That's what it was called.
Yeah, that's right. Somebody said, help yourself to a couple of. Well, I'm from Canada, so a couple means like 30.
Okay, you got a couple boxes or a couple, handfuls?
A couple of cases, yeah.
Okay, here's a trivia question. In the book, there's a name that's this goddamn long that starts with a Y. Say it. What do you two tell me how to pronounce that name?
Well, no. I think
I'll put you on the spot because, dude, I read over that fucking thing for like 20 minutes.
Yes, the source.
we got that. Just got to put a name to.
I think I spelled it out when Mike Hardy said, that was something about it.
Well, I started to spell it out. I got Y-A-S-T. When I started writing the air, I was like, wait a minute, I can't even spell this. And when you break it down, when I think it was Chris or somebody was breaking his name down. What I find amazing, and I'm hoping that you need to go out and pick this book up. I'm telling you, I haven't been this fired up about words in my entire life because it reminded me so much of my experience, but because I know you, Ed, and now I was Al, to the relatability that this book has for those, whether you're a contractor or you're a military guy. Even just a basic civilian, if you had any, involvement to this type of stuff, you'll understand this. But again, too, here's a fact. You have 2 individuals who put out a phenomenal book who are super humble. You know why? Because they're just that goddamn good. That's just the way it is. I mean, you think about it. So, like for you, Al, I think the hardest part, I would think for you, is because you're up close and personal every time somebody was wounded or fatally wounded because you are the doc of the team. Where the other guys were laying down a bit of fire or something like that to protect you and the other dude. So you're the first one on scene to see X. It's just got to suck because they're friends, they're good friends. And now your job is to patch them up, and sometimes it doesn't work. Yeah, because
sometimes it doesn't work, but I was always the kind of guy, and one of the things that I learned from Ed was, teaching others, and you take what you know and you teach others, but when I did that initially, I would just teach them, oh yeah, this is how you do it. You slap on a base, whatever not. But then when it came time to, when he brought me to ground zero, he said, these are the guys that are going to end up taking care of you. And so that's when you start teaching them the right way. You know, it's not just about, okay, well, here's a bandage. It's located over here and it's used for this purpose like that. No, it's how do you put the bandage on? Use a spiral reverse. You minimize their downtime. You promote healing. You do all kinds of things in that nature so that you're not thinking about the bad thing. You're thinking about ways that you can make this guy better, faster. You know, because it's not just the injury. There's stuff that goes on afterwards. There's infection. There's all kinds of things that we just put a bandage on and said, okay, you're good to go. You know, guy'd be dead in a week. And so about that. That was my thing, was to minimize their downtime. I mean, if I'm going to have a guy that wants to thank me for saving him, it would be that I saved him from all the misery thereafter, having to go through rehab and having to go through all this stuff, because I minimized those scars or those wounds while I was in the field. So those guys that thought that way, those are the guys I like to hang with.
You know? Yeah. So what type of dirt did you carry, Doc, in your bag?
I had actually Woundstat. I had Gamcon. I had Celox. I had Quick Clot. Shit, man, I had it all.
Now, riddle me this. Out of all the anticoagulants you had in your bag, which one you thought was the best?
Well, Woundstat by far, because it was faster than Quick Clot, but there's a lot of controversy on its coagulation, not coagulation studies, but post-surgical debridement, where it causes stuff. But military special forces still use it because, you know, Z Medical has the contract with the military to provide it. So it's a big, you know, it's like smoking a Kahlua cigar versus a tobacco. You know, these branding wars that happen between two companies that try to come up with a decent stick. The same thing when it comes with hemostatic agents. You know, you got all this paper or plastic bullshit that's going on. I want the best stuff for the guys that work the fastest and all that other. So the thing about it was it came in so many different variants. There was still old Quick Clot that might have been expired, but it still had that vacuum seal on it. And
yeah,
when you open it up, and if the wind's blowing, you're kind of fucked if it gets in your eyes. But I carried it anyways, even though it was expired, because I knew it still worked, and I was gonna. There's sometimes we'd work on bad guys. We kept back alive. People say, "Well, why'd you save him? He tried to kill you." Well, somebody in Denver needs a fucking kidney, you know. Or what about the intel? You know, let's gather some intel from this guy. Keep him alive so that we can find out where the enemy is, what's their strength, all that other stuff. Yeah, they might not be at the top of the priority, but we still worked on them. But I wasn't going to use my best shit on them. I was going to use the stuff in my. I actually had another bag, a shit bag, a shit bag of med supplies.
So you didn't? Did you like Celox? The Celox Rapid?
Yeah, I like Celox. Celox is good.
The reason I like, I'll tell you, Quick Clot burns like a motherfucker. You put that, you've heard him scream. You put that stuff in an open wound, not inspired. That boy's going through the ceiling. It was burning.
A Quick Clot initially was exothermic. It heated up to about 118 degrees Fahrenheit, but it never really cauterized the wound like a lot of people thought. But you know, the combat gauze, which is also by Quick Clot, is not like that anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, it's body core temperature in terms of its acting agents or whatever not. And same with the chitosan or the shellfish that Celox uses. You know, it's like they work kind of hand in hand. They're probably equal in terms of being up there in popularity and whatnot. My thing was the emergency bandage. You know what? Whoever, you know, the Israeli dressing. They had from the Israeli dressing to the emergency bandage so that Arabs would buy the fucking shit. That was the thing.
No, it's amazing to say, because we use Celox. The reason I like Celox because it was easy to apply. I get a 3-inch or I get a 1-inch, but the debridement, when you got into the battle station, you know, wherever the hospital was, you were whatever part of the theater, the debridement was just saline solution. There was no, you have to cauterize that or dig it out like you used to have to do with Quick Clot or some of the other static agents. It just, for me, it was just easier, and I could carry a shitload of it.
Well, what a lot of people don't know is, like, when Quick Clot, once it forms its clot, if there's any kind of movement in that extremity, it's going to cause the clot to come dislodge, and then you have to use more Quick Clot. With Woundstat, you can reform that putty. You don't have to add another pack of Woundstat. You know, it's kind of like a putty format, so it works in that manner, and it's you know, instead of taking up to 3 minutes, it's more like 1 minute, you know, for it to actually work. And I've used it and I've seen it. So but it's hard to come by now. It's not as readily available. And of course, there were a lot of things, HemCon costs a shitload of money for a bandage on HemCon, and it works really well. But, if we're buying med equipment out of our own pockets, that gets to be expensive. But, you do what you have to do to keep your team alive. And my team, I took care of them, and it wasn't just an injury on the battlefield. It was either through training, it was through medical advice, it was through those headaches and stomach aches and all that other stuff. You keep them going because you got gastrointestinal issues, you got people that are dealing with this, you got rashes that are recurring, and medicine is a force multiplier. A lot of people don't realize that.
Right.
If you can keep a guy in the fight, like we did with Rob Cook down in Herat. Remember, we had to bring him back under Fengrid?
Yeah.
We did that. He should have been flown out of that fob back to Kabul, but he wanted to drive back with us, and so we kept him in the fight. And so you do medicine the right way, it's going to work for you.
Yeah. And then too, it's just having that ability to, the guys are soothed knowing that I have a doc behind me that's in my team that no matter what goes wrong, and for you yourself, that you're training those cats in case you go down, that you want them to have the best training to make sure you're taken care of at the end of the day. That's just how
I wasn't as good at it until Ed opened my eyes. I had tunnel vision. You know what I'm saying? I was just like trying to absorb all this information, and I didn't know shit about. I mean, I knew about medicine, but I didn't know about sharing that information in a manner that was going to benefit me. And when he said, "Hey, you're getting ready to, you're gonna be driving this vehicle in the front. You're gonna be in the lead vehicle. You're gonna be the navigator and the doc." And I'm just going, what did I do? I'm being paid back for some bag of marbles I stole when I was 9 years old. All this bad fucking karma happening to me. I said, shit.
That's like going, "Hey, PFC, get in the front of this one right now."
Yeah.
And then sit back going, "Hey, I'm the gunny in this damn platoon, so take your ass up front, PFC, and start driving." Yeah, that's mentioned too in the book as well. At the end of the day. But all I got to say, and we've been on there pretty good for a long time, is that folks, the listeners here on the Smoke Pit, great read. It's called The Postcards Through Hell by Ed and Al. You can get this either on Amazon or probably at Barnes & Noble. So look for it. Get it. The best part about it is got in the back summaries where you have all the acronyms, the story about, I'm going to show that. That's Al. He's a mean looking motherfucker. That's what I'm saying. With him, if I'd have met him in person, I'd be like, I need a gun and a baseball bat to shoot that bean with a baseball bat. That's a big boy. Folks, you need to go out. You need to buy this book. Because especially if you're having those days and you just want to get it picked up or you want to get out of your demon sense, this book will help you. I'm telling you right now. And I'm glad I had the ability to have the experience to read it and then bring you two on and interview and talk about some key points I thought were key to listeners. So, Al, before we leave, you got anything else you want to add or want to say?
We talk about our brothers all the time, but they're connected to families, and we stay in touch with those people. It's important for us not just to honor the guys, but to honor the families. And we kind of know what they're going through. We share their grief. It might not be as bad, but we've talked to them, and they've reached out to us, and they've thanked us for the information, and that we did them justice. And that was the whole purpose of the book, was to to pay some type of like an epitaph towards them, for them, and keep them alive. Like Ed said, say their names and they'll never die.
Yes, keep on. Yes, as well. I agree. And yourself, Mr. Ford.
Yeah, like I said, we wanted to get that story out there, and I think as me and Al found out as we started put pen to paper, it was a little bit therapeutic. Also, we also wanted to pay tribute to our fallen, the guys we lost. Make sure that we keep saying their names; they live forever.
Well, like you mentioned in the book too, and I don't mean to cut you off, is Generation Kill, that book with Gowan and those guys. They did the same thing. They basically like, hey, put it on paper because it's therapeutic. When you lose a good friend or you lose Marines that you serve with or contractors, it sucks. It's the worst gut-wrenching feeling in the world because you know what? That's where survivor guilt comes in. We talked about earlier. It's not survivor guilt. It's just the way you are as a human. Do I cry? Fucking way I cry. Especially when I watch a Brian song or something like that. But, at the end of the day is that you have to figure out to move forward. And for me, I just want to thank both of you for a very intriguing book. I think it's something it was relatable to myself on quite a few occasions. It kind of made me sit back and chuckle, especially, it seems like every time in the book they're telling how Al's real old. He's the old guy, he's the grandpa. I was thinking, I'm sure at some point, Al, because you were the young guy there, it's in a sense as seniority, and you're kind of like, fuck you.
Yeah, that's true.
Let me take you out back. Let me take you out back and beat your ass and then run your fucking mouth. They cut themselves and you just look at them and say, hey, rub some dirt in that, take some vitamin M and call me in the morning. I don't want your shit out.
Yeah,
But again, ladies and gentlemen, for the Smoke Pit, this is the book. It's called Postcards to Hell. If you don't have it, I highly recommend you go get it. At Amazon, that's where I got mine, and I was signed by our boy there. So I got to send it to make sure Ed signs it. It was a good read, very therapeutic, and I have highlight stuff in here, so days are bad. I can open up and read them.
Oh, right on.
So brothers, thank you so much for such a great read.
Hey, thanks for having us.
Thank you. So we'll probably touch base in about 6 months to see how the book's going and push it out.
Yeah.
But again, to both of you, thank you so much. I appreciate your service as servicemen, and also appreciate the service that you did in Iraq, Afghanistan as contractors.
Oh, thank you.
So with that said, everyone, thank you so much for listening to another episode of The Smoke Pit. Check us out on Pop Smoke Media. That's where everything's at. And check out this book. So Al and Ed, thank you so much. And have a great day. Enjoy your holidays. We'll talk real soon.
All right. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas. So
Merry Christmas.